The diplomatic shuttle descended through wisps of pink clouds as it approached the capital city of the Tessera people. John pressed his face against the viewport, taking in the alien landscape below. Crystal spires rose from the ground like massive gemstones, catching the light of Proxima's red sun and fracturing it into dazzling patterns. The Tessera evolved in harmony with the crystal formations, Kira explained, noticing John's fascination. Their bodies contain similar silicon compounds. They consider these structures sacred ancestors. And the Nolarians? John asked. Amphibious. They live primarily in the southern oceans but need land for certain religious ceremonies. The disputed Vedant Belt has beaches they consider holy sites. Ambassador Zilthar approached them, his insectoid legs making soft clicking sounds on the shuttle floor. We land in 5 minutes. Remember, the Tessera communicate partially through light refraction. Avoid sudden movements that might cast shadows they could misinterpret. John nodded. He'd studied the briefing materials thoroughly but appreciated the reminder. First contact scenarios were delicate enough without adding interspecies miscommunication. The shuttle settled onto a landing pad made of polished blue stone. Through the viewport, John could see a delegation of Tessera waiting. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, their bodies semi-transparent with internal structures that caught and bent light. They looked like walking prisms shaped vaguely like humans with too many joints. Diplomatic contingent, prepare to disembark, announced the shuttle AI. As the team lined up near the exit ramp, Krell, the security chief, approached John. Remember, Protocol 72B, Lieutenant. No matter what happens, you are an observer only. John felt a flash of irritation but kept his expression neutral. Understood, Chief. The ramp lowered and Ambassador Zilthar led them into the alien sunlight. The heat hit John immediately. Proxima 5 was warmer than Earth, the air thicker and rich with unfamiliar scents. The gravity was slightly lighter, making each step feel bouncy and uncertain. A Tessera stepped forward from the welcoming delegation. Light played through its crystalline body, creating patterns that the translator in John's ear converted to speech. The High Crystal welcomes the Galactic Cooperative to Proxima 5. May your light refract with truth. Ambassador Zilthar performed a complex gesture with his 4 upper limbs. We bring greetings from 18 worlds. May our combined wisdom bring peace to your shores. The formal greetings continued as they were led into a massive structure that resembled a cathedral made of living crystal. John walked carefully, aware of how his solid, opaque body cast shadows that made some Tessera flinch slightly. They find U.S. unsettling, Kira whispered beside him. Most species in the cooperative have some degree of transparency or light interaction. Humans are unusually dense. Story of my life, John murmured, earning a musical chuckle from the Arcturian inside. The Crystal Cathedral, they were seated at a circular table. The formal negotiations began with each side presenting their claims to the Verdant Belt. John listened carefully, taking notes on his datapad. The dispute seemed resolvable. Both species had legitimate needs that could be accommodated with proper scheduling and designated territories. As the afternoon wore on, John noticed a growing tension in the room. Several Tessera delegates had joined the original welcoming party, and some of the newcomers flickered with patterns that caused Ambassador Zilthar's antennae to twitch nervously. Something's wrong, Krell muttered, his mandibles clicking softly. Before anyone could respond, a piercing alarm echoed through the cathedral. The Tessera delegates began flashing rapidly in what John recognized as their version of agitated speech. What's happening? John asked, rising to his feet. One of the Tessera approached. Ambassador Zilthar, forgive the interruption? We have received word that Nolarian forces have seized a crystal farm in the disputed territory. The High Crystal must address this immediately. The negotiations dissolved into chaos as the Tessera delegation hurried out. Ambassador Zilthar gathered the cooperative team. This is unexpected, the ambassador said, his compound eyes shifting rapidly. We must contact Delegate Morrow's team with the Nolarians to understand what provoked this action. Krell activated his communicator but shook his armored head. No response from Morrow's team. Something is jamming communications. We should return. To the shuttle, suggested Kira. If both sides are mobilizing, we need to regroup and... The Crystal Cathedral shuddered. A deep boom echoed through the structure and cracks appeared in the walls around them. We're under attack. Krell shouted, drawing a slim device from his belted defensive shield generator. Protect the ambassador, John's training kicked in. He scanned the room, identifying exits and potential cover. This way, he said, pointing. To a service corridor. We need to get to the shuttle. Another explosion rocked the building. Shards of crystal rained down from the ceiling. One large fragment struck Ambassador Zilthar, slicing through his robes and into his thorax. The Vespian crumpled to the floor with a high-pitched keen of pain. "Ambassador down!" John called, rushing to Zilthar's side. Green fluid leaked from the wound. "We need medical assistance." Krell and two other security officers formed a protective circle around them as Kira knelt beside John to examine the ambassador. "The wound is deep," she said. "We need to get him to the shuttle's medical bay." John tore a strip from his uniform and pressed it against the ambassador's wound. "Stay with us, Ambassador." Zilthar's mandibles clicked weakly. "Unexpected. Treachery. Dubdo quos attacking us?" John asked, looking to Krell. The Mantidian's compound eyes scanned the area. "Unknown. Not typical Nilarian tactics." The building shook again. Through a cracked wall, John glimpsed movement outside Tezra security forces exchanging fire with attackers, whose bodies seemed to shimmer and shift like heat mirages. "We need to move now," John said. "I'll help carry the ambassador." Krell hesitated. "Protocol 72B, Lieutenant." "You are not authorized to hell with the protocol," John snapped. "He's bleeding out. We need to move." Without waiting for permission, John carefully lifted Ambassador Zilthar. The Vespian was surprisingly light, his exoskeleton hollow like a bird's bones. Krell's mandibles clicked in agitation, but he nodded. "Fine, but stay in the center of our formation. Do nothing else." They moved as a group toward the service corridor. Krell and his security team forming a protective barrier around John, Kira, and the injured ambassador. They had almost reached the doorway when a section of the ceiling collapsed, blocking their path. "Secondary exit," Krell commanded. Redirecting the group, they hurried through the crystal halls, the sounds of fighting growing louder as they rounded a corner. They came face to face with three attackers. They weren't Nilarians as expected, but Tezra, their crystalline bodies pulsing with angry red light. "Extremists," gasped one of the diplomatic aides. "Crystal Purity faction." The extremists raised weapons handheld devices that focused light into deadly beams. Krell and his security team activated their shields just as the attackers fired. The light beams reflected off the energy shields, causing one to hit a supporting column. With a groan of stressed crystal, another section of ceiling began to collapse. "Move!" John shouted, still carrying the ambassador. They ran, debris falling around them. One of Krell's security officers wasn't fast enough. A massive crystal shard impaled him from above. The Mantidian security chief barely dodged another falling piece, but it struck his leg, cracking his exoskeleton. He stumbled, hissing in pain. "Chief's hit," called Kira. The group was falling apart. Two more extremists appeared ahead, cutting off their retreat to the landing pad. Behind them, the first group of attackers advanced, trapping the diplomatic team in the corridor. John looked at the injured ambassador in his arms, then at the wounded Krell, and made a decision. "Protocol 72B be damned, they wouldn't survive this without action. Kira," he said quietly, "take the ambassador." Before anyone could object, John gently transferred Zilthar to Kira's arms and stepped forward, placing himself between his teammates and the advancing extremists. "Lieutenant Reeves," Krell called out in warning, "remember your restrictions." But John was already moving, his body shifting into a combat stance that felt as natural as breathing. For the first time since boarding the Celestial Harmony, he felt like himself again. "Get the ambassador to the shuttle," he called back. "I'll handle this." The extremists paused, their crystalline bodies flashing with confusion at the sight of the human advancing toward them instead of retreating. They had no way of knowing they were about to discover firsthand why humans were the only species banned from fighting in the Galactic Cooperative. Time seemed to slow for John as he faced the Tezra extremists. His military training took over, his mind calculating distances, angles, and vulnerabilities with practiced precision. The crystalline attackers hesitated, perhaps confused by the soft, fleshy creature advancing toward them instead of retreating. That moment of hesitation was all John needed. He lunged forward, moving faster than the extremists expected. Their light weapons discharged, but John was already rolling beneath the beams. He came up inside the first attacker's guard, striking at the knee-like joint in the Tezra's crystalline leg. The alien toppled with a sound like breaking glass. John didn't pause. He grabbed the fallen extremist's weapon, twisted to avoid another light beam, and fired at the ceiling above the second attacker. Crystal shards rained down, momentarily blinding the Tezra. "Move now!" John shouted to his team. "I'll cover you." Kira helped Krell limp forward while 2 remaining security officers carried Ambassador Zilther. John provided covering fire, keeping the extremists pinned down as his team navigated through the debris-filled corridor. Behind them, 3 more extremists appeared. John spun, firing the light weapon with unexpected precision. One shot struck a supporting column near the new attackers, causing another section of ceiling to collapse and block their path. "How did you know that would work?" Kira called back, her silver eyes wide with astonishment. John didn't answer. He was already moving to the front of the group, leading them through the maze of crystal hallways toward the landing pad. 20 years of combat experience guided his every move, anticipating threats, identifying structural weaknesses, creating paths where none seemed to exist. When they finally reached the exit leading to the landing pad, they found it guarded by 2 more extremists. Without hesitation, John charged them. He moved with a fluid grace that belied his solid human form, ducking under a light beam and delivering precise strikes to vulnerable joints in the Tezra bodies. Within seconds, both guards were incapacitated, their crystalline forms flickering with distress signals. "The shuttle is 50 meters ahead," John said, breathing hard but steady. "Stay tight and move fast." They emerged into the open air of the landing pad. Their shuttle sat untouched, its ramp lowered as if waiting for them. The red sun of Proxima cast long shadows across the polished stone as they hurried toward safety. They were halfway to the shuttle when a final group of extremists emerged from a side building, cutting off their escape. There were 6 of them, their bodies pulsing with angry red light, weapons raised. "Get down!" John shouted. His team dropped to the ground as light beams crisscrossed the air above them. John didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the nearest cover, a low crystal barrier, then used it to launch himself directly at the extremists. What followed happened so quickly that later, when the security footage was reviewed, it had to be slowed to half speed for the Cooperative Council to comprehend what they were seeing. John moved through the group of armed extremists like water through stones. He never stopped moving, never presented a target, always striking at joints and sensory clusters with devastating accuracy. He used the extremists' own weapons against them, their confusion against each other, and the environment itself as both weapon and shield. In 28 seconds, all 6 attackers were disabled. Not dead, John had been careful about that, but thoroughly incapacitated. "Clear," he called, scanning for additional threats. "Get to the shuttle." His team stared at him, frozen in place. John couldn't read their alien expressions clearly, but he recognized the universal body language of shock and fear. "Move," he repeated more forcefully. They finally broke from their trance and hurried aboard the shuttle. John followed, taking one last look at the disabled extremists before the ramp closed behind him. Inside, medical drones were already attending to Ambassador Zilther and Krell, the shuttle pilot. A 4-armed Pox native initiated emergency launch procedures without being told. They lifted off from Proxima 5 with a speed that pushed them all into their seats, only when they were safely in orbit. Heading back to the Celestial Harmony, did the silence in the cabin break? What did we just witness? One of the diplomatic Aides whispered, their eye stalks swiveling toward John. John wiped sweat from his forehead, suddenly aware of how everyone was staring at him. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him tired and increasingly aware that he had violated direct order. "I did what was necessary," he said simply. Krell, his wounded leg now encased in a healing gel, clicked his mandibles. "You violated protocol. 72B. The Council will convene a disciplinary hearing." "The Council can do whatever they want," John replied. "Everyone's alive. That's what matters. Is it?" Krell asked, his alien face unreadable. "Look around you, Lieutenant," John did. "What?" He saw troubled him. His teammates, beings he'd worked alongside for weeks, were pressed against the far side of the shuttle cabin. They were giving him space, a lot of space. Even Kira, who had been the friendliest toward him, kept her distance, though her silver eyes never left his face. "You don't understand what you've done," Krell continued. "The protocol exists for a reason." Before John could respond, the shuttle docked with the Celestial Harmony. As the ramp lowered, two security officers waited, not Mantidians like Krell, but Vespians like the ambassador. Their compound eyes fixed on John, and their postures were rigid. "Lieutenant John Reeves," one of them said formally. "By order of Acting Mission Commander Lenta, you are confined to quarters pending Council review of Protocol 72B violations. Please surrender any weapons and follow us." John didn't argue. He handed over the light weapon he'd taken from the extremist, and followed the guards through the corridors of the massive ship. Crew members they passed stopped and stared. News traveled fast. It seemed his quarters were comfortable enough, a standard cabin modified for human physiology with Earth-normal gravity and atmosphere. But when the door slid shut behind him, he heard the unmistakable sound of the lock. Engaging, he was a prisoner. John sat on the edge of his bed, running his hands through his short hair. He'd saved lives today. Why were they treating him like a criminal? The confused, fearful looks from his teammates bothered him more than the confinement. Hours passed. John paced his cabin, reviewed mission reports on his datapad, and waited. Finally, the door chimed. When it slid open, Kira stood there alone, glancing nervously down the corridor. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, slipping inside. The door closed behind her. "Then why are you?" John asked. She held up a data crystal. "Because you deserve to know the truth, why Protocol 72B exists. Why everyone is afraid. I'm listening." Kira inserted the crystal into his room's display terminal. "This is classified history. The true record of humanity's first contact with the cooperative." The display illuminated, showing footage that John had never seen before. As the images played, his expression shifted from confusion to shock, and finally to understanding. "Now, you see," Kira said softly as the footage ended, "now you understand why humans are the only species banned from fighting even on peace missions." John stared at the blank screen, his world forever changed by what he had just witnessed. John sat in stunned silence as the images from the data crystal faded from the screen. The footage showed humanity's true first contact 50 years ago, not the peaceful meeting with the Vespian scout ship that was in the official records, but something far more violent. "That can't be real," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Kira's silver eyes were solemn. "It is. I have access to the complete archives as a xenobiologist. This incident was classified at the highest levels. The footage had shown a small cooperative exploratory vessel making contact with a human mining outpost on Mars in 2107. What began as a peaceful exchange turned deadly when space pirates attacked both groups. The pirates, a mixed group of rogue aliens, had superior weapons and numbers. The footage showed 3 unarmed human miners fighting back against 27 armed attackers. What followed was a display of violence so effective, so primal, that John now understood the fear he had seen in his teammates' eyes. "The miners were protecting the cooperative delegates," John said. "They saved them." "Yes," Kira nodded. "But the method was disturbing to witness. The humans used mining tools, environmental objects, even their bare hands. They adapted instantly to fighting completely unknown species with unfamiliar anatomies. John remembered the shocked expressions of his teammates on the shuttle. And that's why Protocol 72B exists. The cooperative had never encountered a species like humans before, Kira explained. Every other intelligent species evolved from prey animals or peaceful omnivores. Their civilizations developed through cooperation and defensive technologies. She pulled up comparison charts on the display. Look at the evolutionary paths. Vespians evolved from hive insects that developed intelligence through collective problem-solving. Mantidians like Krell evolved from ambush predators that became intelligent to develop better hiding strategies. Arcturians like me evolved from filter feeders who became intelligent to predict ocean currents. And humans? John asked. Pursue predators, Kira said. The only known sentient species to evolve from animals that hunted by chasing prey to exhaustion. Your ancestors didn't need venom or massive jaws or claws. They simply needed to be more persistent, more adaptable, and better at predicting their prey's movements. John thought about his training in the SEALs. How much of it had built on those evolutionary advantages? When humanity joined the cooperative, Kira continued, there was intense debate. Many species were afraid. Others saw potential. The compromise was Protocol 72B, humans would be welcomed into space but never permitted to fight. Because we're too violent? John asked, feeling a surge of defensiveness. Because you're too good at it, Kira corrected. What you did today on Proxima 5, you disabled 6 armed extremists in less than 30 seconds. No other species could have done that. The way you move, the way you think in combat, it's disturbing to watch. John remembered the fluid efficiency of his actions, the instinctive calculations of angles and vulnerabilities. It had felt natural to him. So we're monsters to you, he said bitterly. Kira shook her head. No, you're predators. There's a difference. But understanding that difference is crucial for humanity's future in the cooperative. The door chimed, interrupting them. Kira quickly removed the data crystal and slipped it into her pocket as the door slid open. Acting Commander Lenta stood there, her compound eyes gleaming in the cabin's light. 2 security officers flanked her. Lieutenant Reeves, she said formally. The council has convened. Your presence is required. John stood, straightening his uniform. Am I on trial, Commander? Not exactly, Lenta replied, her mandibles clicking softly. There are complications. John followed Lenta through the ship's corridors to the main council chamber. Inside, representatives from all 18 species of the cooperative were present either physically or as holographic projections. John was directed to stand in the center of the circular room. Elder Vox of the Pax species, the most senior council member present, spoke first. His translucent body pulsed with light as he addressed the assembly. We are convened to address the events on Proxima 5 and the actions of Lieutenant John Reeves of Earth. The human violated Protocol 72B by engaging in combat during a peacekeeping mission. Murmurs rippled through the council. However, Elder Vox continued, we must also acknowledge that his actions saved the lives of Ambassador Zilther and the entire diplomatic team. Furthermore, he showed remarkable restraint. None of the extremists were killed, merely incapacitated. This caused more murmurs, some sounding surprised. John noticed Ambassador Zilther himself in a medical support chair at one side of the chamber. The Vespian looked weak, but alive. Their eyes met, and the ambassador gave a small nod of acknowledgement. The council faces a dilemma, Elder Vox said. Protocol 72B exists for valid reasons, yet strict adherence today would have resulted in casualties. A new voice spoke up, a human voice. John turned to see a woman entering the chamber. She wore the formal dark blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, adorned with gold insignia marking her as a senior ambassador. The council recognizes Ambassador Patricia Sloan of Earth. Elder Vox announced. Ambassador Sloan walked to stand beside John. She was in her 50s, with short gray hair and the poised confidence of a seasoned diplomat. Honorable Council, she began, I have reviewed the reports from Proxima 5. I propose that Protocol 72B requires revision, not enforcement. This caused an immediate stir. Several council members began speaking at once in their native languages, their translators creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. Elder Vox raised his upper limbs for silence. Explain your position, Ambassador. Protocol 72B was created with good intentions, Sloan said. Humanity understands the concerns our evolutionary history raises. But today's events demonstrate its fundamental flaw. It prevents humans from using their natural abilities even in defensive situations where those abilities could save lives. She gestured to Ambassador Zilther. Would you prefer the ambassador had died because Lieutenant Reeves followed protocol? Before anyone could respond, the chamber's emergency alert system activated. A holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing a Tessera official. Galactic Cooperative Council, the Tessera said, its crystalline body flashing with urgent patterns. We request immediate assistance. The crystal purity extremists have seized control of the Proxima Biotech Research Facility. They threaten to release an engineered pathogen that could destroy all life in the verdant belt if their demands are not met. The council erupted in alarm. Elder Vox raised his limbs again for silence. What are their demands? He asked. Complete withdrawal of all Nolarian presence from Proxima 5, the Tessera official replied, and recognition of crystal purity as the legitimate government. You have 12 hours before they release the pathogen. The transmission ended, leaving the council in chaos. Our nearest peacekeeping vessel is 3 days away, Lenta reported grimly. The research facility is heavily fortified, added Krell, who had joined the meeting despite his injured leg. A standard assault would result in high casualties and might trigger an early release of the pathogen. John exchanged a look with Ambassador Sloan. She gave him a subtle nod. Council members, John said, raising his voice above the commotion. I believe I can offer a solution. The room gradually quieted as all eyes turned to the human standing in their midst. You? Elder Vox asked. What solution could you possibly offer, Lieutenant? The same one that saved your diplomatic team, John replied steadily. Humans have unique capabilities. Let me assemble a small team of human specialists. We can infiltrate the facility, neutralize the extremists, and secure the pathogen without casualties. Impossible, Krell objected. The facility has advanced security systems and at least 20 armed extremists. For any other species, perhaps, Ambassador Sloan interjected, but not for humans trained in special operations. You propose we deliberately send humans to fight? Elder Vox asked, his translucent body rippling with what John interpreted as concern. That directly contradicts Protocol 72B. Yes, John said simply, because sometimes fighting is necessary to preserve peace. Isn't that why the Cooperative has peacekeeping forces in the first place? A thoughtful silence fell over the chamber. Ambassador Zilther's medical chair hummed as he moved forward. I would be dead without this human's combat skills, the Vespian said weakly. Perhaps it is time we reconsider our understanding of humanity's place among us. Ambassador Sloan stepped forward. We propose a trial modification to Protocol 72B, allow Lieutenant Reeves to assemble his team and attempt to resolve this crisis. If they succeed, the Council can consider permanent revisions to the protocol. Elder Vox conferred quietly with several other Council members before turning back to face John and Ambassador Sloan. Very well, he said finally. Lieutenant Reeves, you have permission to assemble a human response team. But understand this, the Council will be watching very closely. The future of humanity's role in the Cooperative may depend on your actions. John stood straight, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. I understand, Elder. We won't let you down. As the Council session adjourned, Kira approached John. You realize what's at stake, don't you? She asked quietly. John nodded. The Celestial Harmony's shuttle bay buzzed with activity as John's team made final preparations. In just 6 hours, he had assembled a 4-person human response unit, all transported via emergency jump gates from Earth. Run through equipment. Check one more time, John instructed as he adjusted the light body armor provided by the Cooperative's security division. Beside him, Staff Sergeant Olivia Marsh nodded and began inspecting her non-lethal weapons. She was a close-quarters combat specialist with 15 years of experience in hostage rescue operations. "Non-lethal rounds loaded and checked," she reported. "Stun grenades secured. Medical patches ready." Across from them, Corporal Sam Powell, their technology expert, was synchronizing portable scanning devices with the research facility's blueprints. "I've mapped 3 possible entry points," he said, projecting a holographic display. "Security systems are advanced but not unbeatable. I can disable them sector by sector if we move quickly enough." Dr. Alan White, the 4th member of the team, was studying data on the pathogen. As both a medical officer and trained negotiator, his role was critical. "The pathogen is designed to break down plant cellulose," he explained. "If released, it would destroy all vegetation in the verdant belt within days. But it's unstable. It needs to be kept in specialized containment units." Kira watched these preparations with fascination. The humans moved with efficient precision, communicating in short, clear sentences and anticipating each other's needs with minimal discussion. "Are all human teams like this?" she asked John quietly. "Special operations teams, yes," he replied. "We train to think and act as one unit." Ambassador Sloan entered the shuttle bay, accompanied by Elder Vox and several council members. The alien delegates kept a noticeable distance from the armed humans. "Lieutenant Reeves," Elder Vox said formally, "the council has approved your mission parameters. You have authorization to infiltrate the facility and neutralize the threat. However, we insist on minimal force. No lethal action unless absolutely necessary to prevent loss of life." "Understood, Elder," John replied. "That was always our intention." Ambassador Sloan stepped forward. "The Council will monitor your progress through Kira's observer feed. Remember, Lieutenant, this mission is about more than saving Proxima 5. It's about showing the cooperative who humans truly are." John nodded, feeling the weight of those words. "We won't let you down, Ambassador." The team boarded their shuttle, a sleek vessel designed for stealth approaches. As they lifted off from the Celestial Harmony, John turned to his team. "We all know what's at stake here," he said. "Not just lives on Proxima 5, but humanity's future in the stars. We do this right by the book, clean and precise." "Like every other mission, LT," Olivia said with a confident smile, "just with a bigger audience." The shuttle descended toward Proxima 5, its stealth systems active. Powell guided them to a landing zone 3 kilometers from the research facility close. Enough for a quick approach, but far enough to avoid detection. As they exited the shuttle, John was struck again by the alien landscape. The red sun cast everything in a crimson glow, and crystal formations jutted from the ground like massive gemstones. The team moved quickly through the terrain, using the crystal structures for cover. "Facility in sight," John reported as they crouched behind a ridge overlooking their target. The research center was a large complex of interconnected domes and spires. Surrounded by a security perimeter, Powell scanned the building. "I'm detecting 23 life signs. Most are clustered in the central lab. That's likely where they're holding the scientists and the pathogen." "Any defense systems?" Olivia asked. "Automated sensors and light beam turrets," Powell replied. "Nothing we can't handle." John turned to Kira. "Stay close to Dr. White. Your job is to observe and report. To the Council, not engage." "Understood?" Kira nodded, her silver eyes reflecting the red sunlight. "Understood." "Team," John said, "remember your training. Move fast, stay quiet, and keep it non-lethal. Let's go." They approached the facility from the northern side, where Powell had identified a maintenance entrance with lighter security. While Powell worked on bypassing the security systems, John surveyed the area. The crystal purity extremists had posted guards, but their patrol patterns were predictable. They lacked proper military training. "Security disabled in sectors 3 through 5, Powell whispered after a few minutes. "We have a clear path. To the central lab if we move now." The team slipped inside, moving through dimly lit corridors with practiced silence. They encountered their first extremist guard at a junction. Before the crystalline being could react, Olivia was already in motion. She fired a specialized stun round that adhered to the Tezra's body and delivered a disabling electrical pulse. The guard collapsed silently, its body flickering weakly. "One down," Olivia murmured. "Clean." They continued through the facility, neutralizing 3 more guards with the same efficiency. John noticed Kira watching them with a mixture of awe and unease. The humans moved like water flowing around obstacles, adapting instantly to each new situation, communicating with hand signals and brief eye contact. As they approached the central laboratory, they paused to assess the situation. Through the reinforced windows, they could see 15 Tezra extremists. They held 8 scientists hostage, a mix of Tezra and Nilarians. In the center of the lab, a containment unit glowed with ominous purple light. "That's the pathogen, Doctor," White confirmed. "The containment field is stable for now, but those controls look rigged for remote detonation." John studied the room layout. "Olivia, you and I will take the main entrance. Powell, access the environmental controls and be ready to flood the room with suppression gas on my signal. Dr. White, identify which extremist is the leader and be prepared to negotiate if necessary." Everyone nodded. John turned to Kira. "Stay back until we secure the room." She touched his arm, a gesture of concern that surprised him. "Be careful, John. The council is watching, but I'm watching too." The team moved into position. John and Olivia flanked the main laboratory doors while Powell accessed a nearby terminal to control the facility systems. At John's signal, Powell triggered a power fluctuation that plunged the lab into momentary darkness. In that instant, John and Olivia breached the room. They moved with a speed and precision that left the extremists disoriented. Olivia deployed 2 stun grenades that filled the room with disabling sound and light, calibrated specifically for Tezra sensory systems. What followed was a demonstration of human combat capability at its most controlled and precise. John and Olivia neutralized armed extremists one by one, using minimal force with maximum effect. They positioned themselves to protect the hostages, anticipated each other's movements, and adapted instantly when 2 extremists tried to reach the pathogen containment unit. Powell joined them, using his technical skills to lock down the laboratory systems and prevent any remote detonation. Dr. White identified the extremist leader and began talking to him, his voice calm and reasonable even in the chaos. In less than 2 minutes, the situation was under control. All extremists were subdued but unharmed. The hostages were safe. The pathogen remained contained. As cooperative security forces arrived to take custody of the extremists, John found Kira staring at him. "What?" he asked. "I've been watching humans fight twice now," she said. "It's still disturbing how efficient you are. But this time I noticed something else, how careful you were. You could have killed them all, but you chose not to." John nodded. "That's the point. Humans aren't just good at fighting, we're good at choosing how to fight and when not to." 3 days later, John and his team stood once again before the Galactic Cooperative Council. The chamber was packed with representatives from all 18 species. Ambassador Sloan stood proudly beside the human team. Elder Vox addressed the assembly. "We have reviewed the mission recordings and testimonies from the rescued scientists. The human team's actions were—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Exemplary. They neutralized a severe threat with no casualties and—" "Minimal force?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. "Therefore," Elder Vox continued, "the Council proposes a modification to Protocol 7-2B. Humans will no longer be banned from all combat activities. Instead, a new specialized division will be created, the Guardian Initiative. This human lead force will train specifically for critical peacekeeping operations, where their unique capabilities can be properly utilized." Ambassador Sloan stepped forward. "The people of Earth accept this honor and responsibility. The Guardian Initiative will uphold the highest standards of the cooperative while protecting all its member species." After the formal proceedings, Kira found John on the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. "So," she said, joining him at the viewport, "humans are no longer banned from fighting." "Only in very specific circumstances," John clarified. And under strict guidelines, it's a start. You know, Kira said thoughtfully, my research suggests that what makes humans unique isn't just your predatory evolution. It's how you channeled those instincts. John looked at her curiously. What do you mean? Every predator species in the galaxy evolved to hunt. But humans evolved to protect. Your pursuit predators who turned those skills toward defending your tribes, your families. She gestured to the stars beyond the viewport. Senior researcher ZK, though, looked at the bright screens floating in front of him. The data made no sense. Again, he rubbed his four upper eyes with long, thin fingers and sighed. The human ship had done something that went against all his predictions. This had happened too many times now. Record report entry, ZK, though, said to the empty room. The air hummed as recording started. Day 2847 of Earth observation. Human unpredictability continues to defy our most advanced models. Today's incident with the mining vessel near their Jupiter outpost confirms my previous findings. He paused and looked at the video playing on one of his screens. The small Earth ship, painted white and blue with the words Horizon Explorer on its side, had been caught in the gravity well of a gas giant. By all calculations, the ship should have been crushed. The correct procedure would have been to abandon ship. Any logical species would have done so. Instead, the human captain, a man named Frank Miller, had fired the engines in short, seemingly random bursts, used the gravity itself to slingshot around a moon, and somehow escaped. The maneuver had never been documented before, had never been taught in any flight school in the galaxy, and had a 0.0037% chance of success according to the simulation ZK Thul ran afterward, yet it had worked perfectly. Add to report, ZK Thul continued. Humans show a disturbing tendency to improvise solutions that our prediction models cannot anticipate. This marks the 37th major deviation from expected behavior in the past cycle alone. The door to his lab slid open with a soft hiss. Commander Rihanna entered, her tall, slender form moving gracefully despite the low gravity on the observation ship. Her skin shimmered with the typical green-blue colors of the leadership caste. Still trying to make sense of the primates? She asked, her mouth parts clicking slightly as she spoke. Saul turned all six of his eyes toward her. They are not simply primates, Commander. Their neural complexity is remarkable. They just don't follow patterns. Rihanna moved closer to the screens. The High Council grows impatient. We've been observing Earth for nearly 10 cycles. Either we make contact or we move on. Other species await classification. Making contact without understanding them would be dangerous, ZK said. He touched one of the screens, and it showed a human history lesson. Look at their past. When they meet new peoples, unpredictable things happen. Sometimes peace, sometimes war. Sometimes they adopt a new culture, sometimes they fight against it. There is no consistent pattern. So your recommendation is? Rihanna asked, her head tilted in the gesture that ZK knew meant she was already growing bored. One more direct test, ZK said. A controlled first contact. Not full diplomatic relations, but a small managed meeting. Rihanna's skin darkened slightly, showing her disapproval. The protocols forbid contact before full understanding is achieved. The protocols were written for predictable species, ZK argued. We've been watching them for 10 cycles, and we understand them less now than when we started. We need new data. 2 days later, ZK watched nervously as the small scout ship descended toward the blue planet. The ship was designed to look less alien, rounded edges, soft lights, a shape that human science fiction had made familiar. They had chosen a remote location in a region humans called Montana for the contact. A single human lived there, a woman named Nancy Bell who ran a small farm away from large cities. Their research suggested she was calm, practical, and unlikely to panic. The perfect test subject, the scout ship landed in her field at night. The team of 3 researchers, led by junior scientist VKM OR, prepared to exit. They wore modified suits that made them look less foreign, only 2 visible arms instead of 4. Skin covered to hide its unusual color, height reduced to match human average. Remember the protocol? ZK said through the communication. Link, no sudden movements, speak only the practiced phrases. If she shows fear, return to the ship immediately. Understood, VKMOR replied. Opening hatch now. Scal watched through the ship's cameras as the three researchers stepped onto Earth soil for the first time. The night air was cool, and stars shone brightly overhead. They had gone only 10 steps when lights came on from the nearby house. The human female appeared at her door. She wore loose blue clothing and held a small object in her hand that their database identified as a communication device. Not a weapon. Vakemore raised a hand in the greeting gesture they had practiced. We come in peace, he said carefully. Practiced English. What happened next would change the course of galactic history. Nancy Bell looked at the three aliens standing in her ruined cornfield. She put her hands on her hips, shook her head, and said, Well, you fellows sure picked a strange time for a visit. But I just made fresh pie. You want some? Vikamor froze. This was not in the protocol. The expected responses were screaming, running, perhaps calling authorities, not ... pie. We are visitors from beyond your solar system, Vakemore tried again, thinking perhaps she didn't understand. Yeah, I figured that much, Nancy said with a small laugh. The spaceship was a pretty big clue. Look, it's cold out here, and I'm not standing in my doorway all night. Either come in and have some pie, or go back to your ship. But if you're staying, wipe your feet, whatever those are. In the observation ship, ZK watched in amazement. The social response prediction algorithms were going haywire, unable to process what was happening. Shall we abort? Vakemar asked through the link, clearly confused. ZK thought for a moment. This was exactly the kind of unpredictability he had been documenting. No, he decided. Follow her lead. But be careful. 15 minutes later, 3 nervous alien researchers sat at a wooden table in a human kitchen, while Nancy Bell served them apple pie and asked questions about space travel as casually as if she were talking to neighbors about the weather. How? Is this possible? Commander Raya asked, watching the scene unfold from beside ZK. There should be fear, confusion, denial. This defies all first contact models. That, said ZK, already updating his report, is precisely what makes humans so fascinating. And potentially so important to the galaxy. They don't just think outside the box. They often don't seem to see the box at all. As he watched Nancy laugh at something Vikamor said, ZK came to a decision. His final report would recommend full contact with humanity. Yes, they were unpredictable. Yes, they were sometimes violent and often illogical, but they were also adaptable in ways no other species had demonstrated. And in a galaxy full of ancient threats and unknown dangers, perhaps unpredictability was exactly what was needed. Humans, he wrote in the final line of his report, may not follow the patterns we expect. But they create new patterns that may change the galaxy forever.